I want to start with a question I hear from patients more often than anything else regarding diet and diabetes, and it gives me pause every time because it's filled with so many years of misinformation, so much unnecessary fear, and so many wasted opportunities to improve my health. The question is this: Doctor, can I eat eggs? My previous doctor told me to watch my cholesterol, and my neighbor says eggs raise my blood sugar. Someone wrote online that diabetics should avoid them, and I don't know which is true anymore. When I hear this question, and I hear it regularly, I understand that there's more to it than just nutritional curiosity. It's fatigue. Fatigue with contradictory information. Fatigue with results that refuse to improve. Fatigue with the feeling that you're doing everything right, and yet your blood sugar doesn't go down. And that's precisely why today I want to talk about eggs, diabetes, and something that interests me as a cardiologist and an endocrinologist. What eggs do not only for blood sugar, but also for the heart and blood vessels. And finally, I'll tell you one thing that most diabetic diet guides completely ignore, and which can change your morning results more than any medication adjustment. Stay with me. During my 46-year career as a cardiac surgeon, I've spoken to thousands of patients about diet. If I had to point to one product that has generated the most myths, that has been most often baselessly demonized, and that has most often been replaced with something far worse, it would be the egg. I've seen diabetic patients who for years gave up eggs for fear of cholesterol, clear throat, and replaced them with instant oatmeal with a banana and orange juice because someone told them it was a healthy breakfast for a diabetic. And then the results came back, a glycated hemoglobin of 8.5%, and no one connected it to their morning oatmeal because oatmeal sounds healthy, because juice sounds natural, because a banana is a fruit. Meanwhile, this combination can spike blood glucose levels to 200 or higher in a person with insulin resistance within 30 minutes of breakfast. And the egg, the supposed culprit, has a glycemic index of 0. Literally 0. It doesn't raise blood sugar levels, even a single point. But before we go any further, I need to explain a certain mechanism, without which everything else I'm about to tell you won't make complete sense. When you have type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, your body has trouble effectively removing glucose from the bloodstream after a meal. Insulin is produced, but cells respond to it less effectively than they should. The result is post-meal glucose spikes, especially after meals high in quickly digestible carbohydrates. That's where protein comes in. When you consume high-quality protein with carbohydrates, the protein acts as a natural brake on glucose absorption. It slows stomach emptying, reducing the rate at which sugar from carbohydrates enters the bloodstream. Instead of a sudden spike, you have a gentler, more controlled glycemic curve that the pancreas and insulin can manage. Eggs are one of the most complete and biologically available sources of protein available. 2 eggs provide about 12 grams of high-quality protein, with all the essential amino acids the body can't produce on its own. And it's precisely this property, not the cholesterol content, but the protein profile, that matters most for glycemic control. Now, I want to talk to you about cholesterol because for decades it was the main reason why patients feared eggs. And I want to be clear about this because misinformation on this matter has caused real harm to millions of people. For years, nutritional science assumed that dietary cholesterol directly raised blood cholesterol levels and that eggs, as a rich source of dietary cholesterol, posed a risk to cardiovascular health. This belief dominated dietary recommendations for several decades. The problem is that it was much more complex than initially thought. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, including a comprehensive meta-analysis, including data from thousands of participants, found that for most healthy adults, dietary cholesterol has surprisingly little impact on blood cholesterol levels. Why? Because the liver produces cholesterol endogenously and regulates its production based on dietary intake. When you eat more dietary cholesterol, the liver produces less. When you eat less, it produces more. This compensatory mechanism is very effective in most people, which is why eggs, despite containing cholesterol, do not raise LDL in the feared way in the vast majority of people. Moreover, research published in Nutrients showed that regular consumption of whole eggs can positively alter the LDL fraction, reducing the proportion of small, dense LDL particles, which are most atherogenic, in favor of larger, less dangerous forms, increasing levels of HDL, the good cholesterol that has a protective effect on blood vessels. I remember a patient who avoided eggs for a year due to elevated cholesterol. When she finally had a thorough lipid panel done, it turned out that her triglycerides were very high and her HDL was very low. Two indicators that raise far more concern for cardiologists than LDL alone. When I asked what she ate instead of eggs, it turned out that she ate cereal with milk and fruit every morning. This combination, simple glucose and fructose on an empty stomach, was driving up her triglycerides and suppressing her HDL, and avoiding eggs didn't help her at all. But I have to be specific here, because I like precision in medicine, and there's a subgroup of the population that responds more strongly than average to dietary cholesterol. They're called hyperresponders. They're estimated to make up about 15 to 20% of the population. In these individuals, egg consumption can cause a more pronounced increase in LDL. If you have a history of very high LDL cholesterol, especially with a normal diet, or if you know from experience that your cholesterol responds strongly to diet, talk to your doctor about monitoring your lipids when regularly consuming eggs. This is a personal decision, not a blanket ban. For the remaining 80 to 85%, eggs are a food that has a beneficial or neutral impact on lipid profiles and offers exceptional value for glycemic control. And it's precisely this combination, a zero glycemic index plus high-quality protein plus a favorable fat profile, that makes eggs one of the most valuable foods in the diet of someone with diabetes or insulin resistance. Since you've been with me this far, and I'm really glad you're here, because we're now reaching what I consider the most important point in this entire conversation, I want to tell you about egg yolks. If there's one recommendation that has caused unnecessary harm over the years, it's throwing away the yolk and eating only the egg whites. If you're subscribed to this channel, thank you. If you haven't, you're welcome. Not because I care about numbers, but because what we're discussing is valuable knowledge before you end up at the doctor's office with avoidable results. The yolk is where the vast majority of an egg's nutritional value is concentrated. It contains choline, a substance essential for fat metabolism in the liver. The liver of a person with diabetes or insulin resistance has a particularly high need for support, as one of the key mechanisms of insulin resistance is the accumulation of fat in the liver, which impairs its ability to regulate blood glucose. Choline supports liver fat metabolism and is one of the few dietary components that directly impacts liver health. The yolk also contains vitamin D, and vitamin D deficiency is strongly associated with insulin resistance. Research published in Diabetes Care has shown that supplementing vitamin D improves cell sensitivity to insulin, which directly translates to better glycemic control. The yolk provides lutein and zeaxanthin, antioxidants that protect the retina from damage caused by chronic hyperglycemia. Diabetic retinopathy, vision damage caused by diabetes, is one of the most common and disabling complications of this disease. The yolk contains B vitamins, which support nervous system function and may be important in preventing diabetic neuropathy, that unpleasant tingling and numbness in the limbs that occurs with prolonged hyperglycemia. Whole eggs. Throwing away the yolk means throwing away most of the nutritional value. Now, I want to tell you something that, in my opinion, is absolutely crucial, and what determines whether eggs will help or harm your blood sugar. It's not the quantity of eggs, it's not the cholesterol, it's the method of preparation and what you combine them with. Because you can have the healthiest product in the world and completely destroy its properties with the wrong combination. And unfortunately, the way most people prepare eggs is precisely what negates their benefits. Frying them in large amounts of butter or oil and serving them with white bread or a roll is a combination that can spike blood sugar levels to 200 with alarming regularity in someone with insulin resistance. Not because eggs are bad, but because you're surrounding them with simple carbohydrates, which fiber has no inhibition, and saturated fats, which temporarily disrupt insulin signaling in muscle cells. This is biochemistry, not opinion. How do you prepare eggs for optimal glycemic control? Boiled eggs are the most practical method. Bring cold water to a boil, 10 minutes for a firm yolk, 6 minutes for a soft one. You can prepare a few eggs in the evening and keep them in the refrigerator for the next few days. Scramble eggs in a non-stick pan without fat. Eggs contain enough of their own fat to prevent sticking. Lightly crack them. Pour them into a medium-hot pan. Stir gently for 2 to 3 minutes until creamy. Vegetable omelet, 2 eggs, spinach, tomato, onion, bell pepper, mushrooms. Vegetables provide additional fiber, which further slows glucose absorption and prolongs satiety. And here's the key question: what to serve eggs with? Avocados are the perfect companion for someone with diabetes or insulin resistance. Healthy fats, unsaturated, the same ones I discussed with olive oil, slow digestion, and stabilize the glycemic curve. Spinach provides magnesium, a mineral that many people with diabetes are deficient in, and that plays a role in cell sensitivity to insulin. Tomatoes, bell peppers, zucchini, vegetables high in fiber and low in carbohydrates. The perfect complement. This combination, 2 eggs, half an avocado, and a handful of vegetables, can maintain stable blood sugar levels for 4 to 5 hours, meaning you can get to dinner without sudden hunger pangs and blood sugar spikes that are so difficult to control. What to avoid with eggs? White bread. Because it's absorbed quickly without protein as a brake, it causes a sharp spike in blood sugar. Fruit juice, even freshly squeezed, is a fiber-free sugar that enters the bloodstream almost as quickly as soda. Processed meats and processed cheeses, as they are loaded with sodium, preservatives, and processed fats, which are not good for your blood sugar or blood pressure. If you want to add something protein, choose cottage cheese in moderation. Now, I want to tell you about something that surprised me clinically when I started using it with patients, and which for many of them proved to be a breakthrough in controlling their morning blood sugar. I'm talking about eggs in the evening. Most people think of eggs exclusively as breakfast. However, eggs eaten for dinner in the form of an omelet with vegetables without bread have a very specific metabolic effect overnight. When you consume high-quality protein in the evening instead of carbohydrates, the liver, which produces and releases glucose into the bloodstream throughout the night through a process called gluconeogenesis, does so in a more moderate and controlled manner. The result is lower fasting glucose levels the next morning. I've observed in my patients that this change alone, without any medication adjustments, can lower morning glucose levels by 15 to 20 points. This is a clinically significant difference that translates into glycated hemoglobin levels over a 3-month period. Research published in Diabetic Care confirms that the macronutrient composition of the evening meal influences fasting glucose levels and morning insulin resistance. A meal high in protein and low in simple carbohydrates in the evening is associated with lower fasting glucose levels the next morning and lower serum markers of inflammation. 2 mechanisms. 1 meal, and it costs as much as 2 eggs and a handful of vegetables. I want to talk about egg count now, because this is another area where excessive caution based on outdated data prevails. For most adults without severe kidney disease, active gallstones, or genetic disorders of lipid metabolism, 2 to 3 whole eggs a day is safe and beneficial. This position stems from the current state of scientific knowledge, confirmed by numerous cohort and randomized studies on large populations. I'm not talking about 20 eggs a week as a goal in itself. I'm talking about the fact that fear of 2 eggs a day is medically unjustified for the vast majority of people. And there's another important practical issue that I can't ignore as a physician. If you're taking metformin, eggs have absolutely no effect on its action, and you can eat without any worries. If you're taking insulin, talk to your doctor about any planned dietary changes, as a high-protein diet can make insulin work more effectively. This is good news, but your doctor should be aware of this so they can adjust their dose if necessary. And regardless of what dietary changes you make, always inform your doctor. Communication with your healthcare team is the foundation of good diabetes management. Now, I want to put all this into one concrete, practical picture, because information is only valuable when it can be implemented. The optimal breakfast for someone with diabetes or insulin resistance: 2 boiled or scrambled eggs without fat, half an avocado, a handful of spinach or tomatoes, and perhaps a small slice of whole grain bread with visible grains, eaten after the eggs, not before them. Why does the order matter? Because if you start with bread, the glucose from the bread enters the bloodstream before the egg white has a chance to act as a brake. If you start with eggs, the egg white is already active when the glucose from the bread begins to be absorbed. For dinner, instead of rice, pasta, or bread, have a 2-egg omelet with vegetables. Light, nutritious, and with a documented effect on morning blood sugar. This is a simple change that costs pennies and can change results. And finally, I want to tell you something I tell my patients every time we talk about diet and diabetes. Diabetes is not a death sentence. It's a disease that requires management, and daily choices have a real, measurable impact on outcomes. The egg you've been afraid to eat for years can be one of your most effective allies in this fight. Not because it's magical, but because it has biological properties precisely tailored to what a body with insulin resistance needs. Protein that slows blood sugar levels, a high glycemic index, whole that supports the liver, and vitamin D that supports insulin sensitivity. One product, multiple mechanisms of action, low price, excellent availability. Now you have knowledge that can change how you start tomorrow. Do something specific with it. Tomorrow morning, 2 eggs cooked with avocado instead of instant oatmeal with juice, and check your blood sugar an hour after breakfast. Compare it to your normal blood sugar. Let your own body tell you if it makes sense. And if you have a loved one, a partner, a parent, a friend, someone struggling with diabetes, with unstable blood sugar, who's been afraid of eggs for years and doesn't know why their results won't improve, send them this video. Because the right knowledge delivered at the right time can make a very real difference in someone's life. Thank you for being here with me. See you next time.